With the whole Afghanistan thing going on, it's kind of it is of course impossible to say how the Afghanistan withdrawal would have gone down if Donald Trump had still been squatting in the White House instead of Joe Biden. But we can say this much: whatever happened, the entire Republican Party and the whole right-wing media propaganda machine would be behind it 10,000%. And this is no fucking mystery. If the suicide bomb that killed 13 of our soldiers had exploded during a Trump squadancy, faux news and the GOP would have found a way to blame the woke generals, as Trump had recently called the American brass. And if we had taken out an ISIS K vehicle that posed an immediate threat to our operations in Kabul, as we in fact did on Sunday, Kevin McCarthy and Laura Ingraham would be carrying on as if Trump had fired the rocket himself. And this is business as usual for the American right, of course. But it's worth remarking on here, because on this occasion it's considerably more consequential. The United States has just lost a war for only maybe the second time in its history, the other one being the ambiguous loss in Vietnam. In a different world, this might have meant that outside of some partisan bickering, leaders of both parties would be mutually invested in repairing America's international standing and reputation. But given the Republicans today, that's just a fucking fantasy. They'll try to use Afghanistan to destroy Biden, and if that means damaging the country, so fucking what? This starts with Trump himself. I don't know if you've been paying attention to his rhetoric over the past 2 weeks, but it's obviously been harder to do so since he lost his perch on Twitter. But it's been comparatively relentless. According to The Independent, Trump has issued 12 lies in the past 5 days. Around the same time, interestingly enough, the Republican National Committee purged its website of an old page that praised Trump's historic peace agreement with Taliban because he didn't have one. In the most recent spate of the communication, Trump made the following claim: if I were now squatter, the world would find that our withdrawal from Afghanistan would be a conditions-based withdrawal, right? He'd have so much control over the situation than Biden. Yeah, I doubt that. It's not even clear that Trump's plan to withdraw from Afghanistan was sincere, Chris Miller said. He was the acting Secretary of Defense at the end of Trump's squadancy, and this is what he told Defense One, that it was a ruse. Regardless, there's ample reason to worry that Trump would have bumbled his way into escalating matters anyway. And this isn't just fucking speculation here, because this is true. There's actual evidence for this. In late March, the Taliban had launched a rocket assault on the forward operating base Chapman, a U.S. outpost located in Afghanistan's Khost province. CNN had reported that no Americans were killed or injured, so it was presumably some kind of warning shot, but it was the first prominent Taliban attack on the U.S. forces since the Doha Agreement. Joe Biden responded by doing nothing much. Some will see that as weakness, others will recognize that, given that the attack didn't amount to much, and given that it just happened just 5 weeks before the originally agreed upon withdrawal date of May 1st. Maybe it wasn't such a horrible deal to downplay it. But last week on Hugh Hewitt's radio show, Trump said this. When Hewitt had asked him if he would have considered the Doha Agreement breached at that moment, and basically Trump said, oh, it would. We would have hit them so hard it would have been breached, and they would have come back and they would have said, please, please, please. We had a couple of conditions breached, much less than what you just mentioned. And that was a big hit. When I saw that and heard about that, I said, well, that's strange. It was strange because they would never have done that if it was me. Yeah, they would have. As ever, Trump oscillates back and forth between the fantasy world of his mind, where the Taliban quaked in such fear of him, which they didn't, that they never would have done such a thing in the real world, where he's acknowledged the premise of Hewitt's softball question. But the point is this: based on what he said in that interview, he would have escalated matters at that moment, blown up the whole deal. Trump's instinct against imperialist adventure was one of the few decent and humane notions the man entertained, but that decent instinct was forever at war within his tortured soul, with this insatiable macho instinct to dominate and destroy. On the one hand, he wanted to negotiate with people like the Taliban's Abdul Baradar and North Korea's Kim Jong-un to prove to the world that he was a master negotiator, which he wasn't. On the other, he thinks they're all shithole people he'd like to destroy, as he did ISIS's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and Iran's General Qasem Soleimani. I have no objection to those two assassinations, but I also don't think they were the biggest thing that happened in the Middle East in 100 years, as he bragged to Hewitt. Biden, after a rocky first week, has looked steadier on Afghanistan in recent days. His remarks after the 13 deaths of the U.S. Marines were appropriate, and nobody doubts that Joe Biden, who has spent the last 20 years showing up without the media paying attention to the Delaware Air Base, to which military corps are often returned, and who ends every speech with "God bless our troops," cares about our soldiers. We'll see what the fateful next couple of days bring, but we can't know what will happen. But I will say this much: there's no doubt in my mind which person I would rather see in the White House right now. It's either going to be a megalomaniac whose first thought is his own personal glory, or a man who sees himself as an actual public servant whose first thought is the families of the Americans in harm's way. And it's pretty much an obvious choice. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And thanks for listening.